and welcome back to another podcast episode with Brittney Bundles. You are listening to the Brittney Bundles podcast, where we empower people through entrepreneurship. And today is a new year. Today is a new year. I thank God that I'm here. I thank God that I made it through, that we all made it through last year. But I do want to say this, that there's a lot of people that are coming into this new year with the same mindset. Coming into this new year with the same mind will definitely put us on track or on pace to receive the same type of experiences or similar experiences as we've had before. So what I want to talk about in this episode, and honestly, I'm ready to kind of dive right in. I want to talk about how our mind has changed, some of the things that we've learned from last year, how to continue moving forward, and also how is our mentality thriving and growing in this year. What are we thinking about? What changes, again, are we implementing? Because I don't want to stay the same and I don't want to stay stagnant. So with this podcast this year, we're going to be talking, of course, about entrepreneurship. We're still going to be talking about the fundamentals, but I also want to take this podcast in a direction of talking about some of the results of what we've been doing. Because I think it's very important to not only focus on the fundamentals of how to build and structure your business, but it's also very important to highlight not just our failures, not just our shortcomings, not just areas that we can work better towards, but also what has been working well for us. What is going good? What type of results, like I mentioned, have we received based on the seeds that we've planted, based on the action steps that we've taken, based on the way that we have structured and grown our business. So let's talk about that today as well. So again, if you are interested in the Brittney Bundles podcast, please be sure to spread the word. And the reason I say again is because I've mentioned this in previous podcast episodes. So if you are not used to the Brittney Bundles podcast, or if this is your first time listening to the Brittney Bundles podcast, please invite a friend or a family member or someone that you feel will find great value in this message. Because again, today we're going to be talking about New Year, same mind. New Year, same mind. You can share this episode on Facebook, Instagram, and there's other ways that you can share as well by copying the link and sending a text message or by DMing, whatever the case may be. Let's really be intentional on spreading the word on this podcast, not just for me, but also for the entrepreneurs that are going to be featured on this podcast, and also for the sponsors that are going to be sponsoring and that have sponsored episodes on this podcast. We want to make sure that we're doing our part in spreading the word about entrepreneurship and spreading the word about as many businesses that are value-based as we possibly can. So if you are interested in this episode, get ready, get set. We're about to get started in just a moment. All right, so we're back. So again, we're talking about New Year, same mind. Every year, there's so many posts on social media. There's so much conversation about a new year, the new year, what we're going to start off doing, New Year's resolutions. And that's really great to start thinking about what we want to happen and prioritizing our goals and creating plans to actually get us to where we want to be. However, one thing that I've noticed that is very common is that there's new resolutions with the same mindset. There's new goals with the same actions. And so I want to start off by saying this. It's a new year, but let's have a mental check-in with ourselves and figure out how we're viewing circumstances. Are we still viewing circumstances in a pessimistic way? Are we still viewing circumstances as woe is me, or wow, everyone's against me, no one's supporting me? Or are we actually looking at the opportunities in every single avenue of our lives? Opportunities. There are going to be different areas in your business that you find beneficial that others don't. That's just life. That's life. You know, there are going to be things that I gravitate towards that maybe my neighbor doesn't, and that's fine. However, what I do challenge myself to do is to look at the opportunities in everything that arises. So I can look at a certain app and say, I don't know if it's worth my time being on the app. I can look at an app and say, I don't really know if people on this app are genuine. I can go back and forth all day, and those thoughts can be genuine. Those thoughts can be valid. And I can also say, well, what are the opportunities for not only myself, but for the others on this app, and how can we potentially grow together? It's all about our perspective and our mentality. And I'm choosing to live a life where I'm looking at the opportunities in everything that presents itself to me. Does that mean that I'm going to take and implement everything that comes my way? It does not. But it does mean that I'm no longer looking through the eyeglass of what's wrong. I'm no longer only looking at my disadvantages or how I could fall, but I'm also looking at the opportunities and the potential that certain apps, the potential that certain relationships, the potential that certain choices can have in my life and in the overall goal that I have for my business. So it's about looking for opportunities. What opportunity can I find for not only myself, but for those involved with this app? We're just using this app for an example, where the opportunities would be that some people are finding inspiration. Some people are able to network. We're in quarantine. So the more opportunities and access that we have to other people virtually, in my opinion, the better. There are also people that are becoming more skilled at public speaking and using their skills and their gifts and their talents, because what you don't use, you often lose. And we've talked about that on this podcast as well. And so it's an opportunity to not only speak to people, but it's an opportunity to practice the skills that God has given you as well to continue being able to provide value-based solutions that we are providing. Not only that, but it's also an opportunity where we can learn. It's not just about getting on an app, in my opinion, and sharing all of the information that you know. And it's not about getting on an app and learning everything that you can without giving anything back. It's all a collective. It's all about working together, in my opinion. So what I'm asking myself is, what opportunities do you see, Brittney? What opportunities are there for you? So often we spend tons of time looking at things that are not going right in our life, looking at what could go wrong, looking at potential falls, and we really forget sometimes about all of the potential opportunities and all of the potential gains that we possibly can have if we push ourselves further. So I'm saying it's a new year, but do we have the same mind? I know that I can't get to a new place if I'm doing the same action steps with no intention on growing. Even if my action steps have led me this far, and even if my action steps are working, there's still room for improvement. There's still room for growing. And so what I want to focus on, like I mentioned, are my opportunities. So I'm mentally checking with myself and I'm asking, Brittney, where is your mindset for this year? Where is your mindset for the years to come? What are you focused and committed to doing? What are you seeing that you didn't see before? And with that comes growth. With that comes growth. Me being able to look at different circumstances and seeing different opportunities and being able to play different outcomes shows me where I'm growing. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is New Year resolution or lifestyle change. So often we hear people talking about my New Year's resolution, what I'm committed to this year, what I'm going to do this year. I don't even want to focus on just this year. I don't even want to focus on just this year, but what are we committed to changing in our lives? Are we committed to implementing? Because that's also where true change comes. You can have a resolution, but typically people's resolutions stop around what? Would you say March or April? I mean, I haven't looked up statistics, but I can just say from people that I talk to, everyone's excited when January hits and then February hits and you're still a little excited. And then typically around March or April, I stop hearing about resolutions. I start seeing different types of posts on social media. The vibe starts to be different. The optimism is leaving. And so what I want to focus on is not so much my New Year's resolution, but I want to focus on what type of lifestyle changes am I going to implement to make sure that I am building the lifestyle that I want for myself and my children. That boils down to the type of relationships that I'm entertaining. That boils down to how I'm spending my time. That boils down to how I'm investing my money. That boils down to my relationship with God. That boils down to lifestyle changes, not just something that I'm committed to doing for this year. What type of lifestyle changes do I need to make sure that I am living the healthiest, most successful, fulfilling life that I possibly can? And ultimately, I want to make sure that my life is pleasing to God. So I have to make lifestyle changes. And again, I used to think New Year's resolution. But with the new year and a new resolution doesn't constitute change. It has to be something that we're committed to doing. It has to be something that we're willing to implement and change in our lives. Not just for a few months, not just for a year. But what are we committed to doing for the years to come? Now, the third tip that I wanted to point out is, what did we learn from last year? There are so many people that are starting New Year's resolutions. And again, there's nothing wrong with the New Year's resolution. I have nothing against that. But there are a lot of people that are starting New Year's resolutions that have not taken the time to identify what they've learned from last year. Last year has taught me a lot. Last year taught me that I could not depend on my business for everything like I thought I could. When the virus first hit and everything was up in the air with jobs, with unemployment, with steady income, I experienced the loss of sales with my business. And although I had thought that I planned for the loss of sales, I did not plan for what I encountered through this pandemic. I did not plan it because I couldn't foresee it. Yes, I was blessed enough to have savings. Yes, I was blessed enough to have multiple streams of income. Yes, I was blessed enough to be able to sustain my family through this pandemic. However, I do want to say that there's a lot of things that I've learned, and because of that, I moved differently. I'm not moving the same as I moved before. Although I never put all my eggs in one basket, I'm even more intentional about making sure that I'm spreading my eggs out as much as I possibly can. So if something else unforeseen happens, I'm in a better position. I also am able to tap into the skills and the gifts that God gave me. And I learned how to monetize even more of those skills and gifts because I had to. I had to in order to feed my children. I had to in order to grow. And so looking at what we learned from last year is going to help us be able to propel in the future. What did you learn from last year? What type of lessons were you able to document, whether it's physically or mentally, that is going to stop you from making some of the same mistakes or making some of the same choices that we implemented last year? What can we do to make sure that we're better securing our business for any unforeseen events or circumstances? What did we learn from last year? It's kind of like when I'm talking to different people, right? And I ask them, hey, why did you leave your job? What happened? And a lot of times we get into talking about different experiences from our 9-to-5 life. And there are entrepreneurs that still work jobs, and they'll send me emails and explain, today is my last day working. I need your help to be able to get my business in the right place so I don't ever have to go back to that business again or to that job again. And I ask them, well, why? What happened? And they give me sometimes almost 2 to 3 pages of why they hate the job. And, I'm not going to judge anyone because I've been there. If you ask me what I didn't like about my last 9-to-5, I'd probably be able to come up with 2 to 3 pages as well. However, what I like to focus on is, what did you learn from that job? What did you learn from that job? Did you learn how it felt to be unappreciated? And how are we going to implement that into our business to make sure that our customers and clients never feel that way? What did you learn about being on a strict schedule with no vacation time and being a full-time single parent? And how are we going to use those lessons to ensure that we do everything in our power to make sure that we're providing freedom for ourselves and freedom for our generations to come? What did we learn from our poor experiences? So often we dwell on what did not go right. So often we dwell on what went wrong, and we really don't focus on what we learned. In every situation that we consider bad, there's a lesson. There is a lesson. If I never looked at the lessons and I only looked at what went wrong, do you know how I would feel as a person? Not good. Not good at all. So let's challenge ourselves to understand and identify what we learned from last year. The next tip that I want to talk about is, what are our plans to keep ourselves accountable? Because if it's a new year and we're constantly visiting the same patterns, we're constantly visiting the same heartaches, the same disappointments, what can we do to make sure that we're changing something in our actions, something within our thinking process, so that we won't keep revisiting this same story? We have to keep ourselves accountable. So what does that look like? Some people keep themselves accountable by having a business buddy. And they have all types of different names for business buddies, but essentially is someone that helps you stay accountable to your business. So if your business goals are to make sure that you're consistent with posting on social media, it's someone that will tap you on the shoulder when they don't see posts consistently, saying, hey, we need to post. This is something that you want to do because it's going to move you closer to this goal. Remember this goal we talked about in January? And so Keeping yourselves accountable. There are all sorts of creative ways to keep yourself accountable. One of the ways that I keep myself accountable is I look at my analytics. I look to see what I'm doing, and I'm looking to see how that is affecting my business. Now, I am not a numbers person. I don't focus just on the numbers, but I do focus on the action steps. And I do believe that the action steps have a huge part in the results of one's business or in the results of one's life. And so I keep myself accountable by looking at my analytics and looking at my growth, and also looking at what I've done well. I like to focus on what I've done well, and I also like to focus on what I can improve on. And those are the opportunities that I touched on in the beginning of the podcast. So what are our plans to keep ourselves accountable? What are our plans going to be to make sure that we're actually moving in a direction that's going to be satisfactory to our long-term goals? What's your plan? What's your plan to keep yourself accountable? And if you don't have a plan to keep yourself accountable, I strongly suggest you create one. Because I'm telling you, the new year hype dies down. Like I said, from my experience, and I can't tell you about, your life or what you see on social media, but I can say from my perspective, a lot of times the new year talk and hype dies down around March and April. And so what can we do to make sure that we're keeping ourselves accountable even when the new year excitement dies down? And then the last thing that I want to talk about is focusing with grace. So we're going to be focused this year on what we want to obtain. We're going to be focused this year in our business. And I'm speaking that into existence because that's really what I want to happen. With focus, a lot of times comes growth. If you're focused on something that you want to do, that's what you're going to put your attention to. There are things that we're putting our attention to that are growing. And we're wondering, why is this growing? Why does this keep happening? Well, what you focus on typically grows. So if you're someone and you're focused on the negativity in your life, you're focused on the drama in your life, you're focused on what's not going well in your life, you may start to see that, okay, wow, it seems like more negativity is coming. It seems like more drama is coming. It seems like when it rains, it pours. Yeah, it may. But it goes into what we're focused on. Now, there can be times where you're focused on something that's completely opposite of what you're actually experiencing in life. Well, there are people that are very optimistic, very inspirational, very positive, and still experience shortcomings. That's life. However, I do want to point out what you focus on typically begins to be what consumes you. And we don't want anything consuming us that's negative. We don't want anything consuming us where we don't have the option to say, you know what? This is something that I no longer find interest in doing, or this is something that I no longer want to do, and not be able to do that. There are people that are addicted and chained to drama, addicted and chained to mishaps, addicted and chained to struggle. And what I want to do is I want to reset that mentality, and I want to remind everyone that we can choose what we focus on. So we're not going to ignore things in our life that are happening that aren't pleasant, but we're still going to focus on our dreams. We're still going to focus on what we want to happen. We're still going to focus on making sure that our children have a better life than what we had. We're still going to make sure that we're focused on being pleasing in God's eyes. We're still going to make sure that we're focused on walking in our truth. We're still going to make sure that we're focused on implementing the seeds that we need to get us to the next level. Focusing with grace. And when I say with grace, what I'm referring to at that point is saying, let's focus, but let's be gracious in how we hold ourselves accountable. Let's not be so hard on ourselves this year or any of the years to come. Let's not down ourselves when something doesn't go as planned. Let's not cut ourselves mentally when something falls out. Let's make sure that we're constantly feeding ourselves positivity, that we're constantly being optimistic, that we're holding ourselves accountable, that we're linking up with people that we can help hold accountable and can help hold us accountable in return. We're also looking at the lessons that we've learned and not just dwelling on what we went through. We can dwell on what we went through for eternity. Or we can decide to say, you know what? I went through this. I thank you, God, that I went through this, because if I did not, I would not have learned it this way. I thank you, God, for showing me what I do have. I thank you, God, for showing me how strong I really am. I thank you, God, for showing me that there is redemption. I thank you, God, for showing me that I can continue to move forward. So this year, I want to go into this year. We're already here, but I want to make sure that we're staying in this year with a new mind. Because if we have the same mind and a new year, there's not much change that can come. Change doesn't come with the start of the new calendar. Change doesn't start because it's the first. Change doesn't start because you just wake up and say, okay, I saw a post on social media that says new year, new goals. So change is starting today. Change only comes when we decide that change is going to come, and not just come, but it's going to stay. So are you creating a New Year's resolution, or are you creating a new lifestyle? I know for me, I'm creating a new lifestyle. And that new lifestyle is implementing action steps that have worked for me previously, currently, and also being open-minded enough to learn new ways to enhance my level and my way of thinking and living. So I really hope that you all got something from this podcast. Again, I want to go into this new year with a different mindset. Not saying that our mindset was bad last year, not saying that there was anything wrong with the mindset, but there's also nothing wrong with implementing change and implementing a new set of goals and growth and looking at it as a lifestyle change instead of just a resolution for this year. What can we do that will outlast this year? What changes can we plant that are going to continuously grow? Like I say in every podcast, I don't want this episode to end. If you do want to continue to connect or be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to me via email. My email address is Btalks, that's the letter B, Talks, @yahoo.com. I'm also on Instagram at Brittney_bundles. That's Brittney, BRITTNEY_bundles, BUNDLES. I'm on Facebook, Brittney Bundles, Twitter, Brittney Bundles, and now on Clubhouse, Brittney Bundles. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll talk to you on the next episode.